A cold wind whispered through the empty corridors of the rusted tomb. The tomb was older than any living memory, drifting on a dead planet far from the busy stars. Its metal walls were scarred and corroded, and the floor was littered with broken machines that had not moved for thousands of years. Inside, in the deepest chamber, something slept. Or at least it seemed to sleep. The Dragon Queen lay still, her massive body coiled in the shadows. Her scales, once bright with color, were dulled by centuries of darkness. Her wings, folded around her like a shield, were thin and fragile. Even her eyes, closed for millennia, seemed heavy with time itself. 2,000 years had passed since the chains had taken her freedom, and yet some spark of life remained in her chest. It was a faint pulse, almost like a whisper in the vast emptiness. Outside the tomb the human arrived. His name was Rylan, a salvage explorer who drifted from planet to planet, looking for old technology to sell. He did not expect to find much on this dead world. Most would have said it was worthless, a tomb lost in space. But Rylan had a strange habit of listening to what others ignored. And in the silence of the tomb, he heard something, a low, almost musical vibration that made the air hum. He paused. The sound was not like the wind. It was not the rust moving. It was alive. The human stepped carefully, his boots making soft echoes on the metal floor. Every corridor he passed was dark and quiet. Shadows twisted along the walls and small lights flickered from broken consoles. He had no idea what waited for him. He only knew that curiosity would not let him turn back. The closer he came to the inner chamber, the warmer the air became. The hum grew louder, and it seemed to speak directly to him, though no words were spoken. Rylan felt a strange pull, a sense that something old and powerful was watching. Finally he reached the massive door at the end of the hall. It was covered in rust and deep scratches, as if many hands had tried to open it over the centuries. Rylan ran his hand along the surface. He noticed strange markings, almost like a language, carved into the metal. He did not understand the symbols, but he felt their weight. The chains inside had not been broken by time. They were made from an alloy unknown to modern science, cold and heavy. The Dragon Queen had struggled against them when she was first locked away, and though she had long given up hope, a faint memory of that struggle lingered in her mind. The chains had been a cruel gift from those who feared her. They had thought that time alone would destroy her spirit. But now something had changed. The human's presence stirred the air, shaking the dust that had settled for thousands of years. The Dragon Queen's eyes opened slightly, and she felt the smallest movement in her chest, a beat that had long been forgotten. She did not yet rise. Her body was weak. Her mind was fogged with memory and pain. Yet she sensed the human. She smelled curiosity, courage, and something she could not name. Rylan knelt and studied the chains. He ran his fingers along the rusted locks and mechanisms. He did not feel fear. Most would have fled if a giant dragon stirred in the darkness, but he was not most humans. His mind was full of questions, not of threats. He whispered as if the dragon could hear him, "I don't know what you are, but I want to help." The hum shifted. It became a faint vibration in Rylan's chest. The tomb seemed to breathe as if it were alive. Small pieces of rust fell from the ceiling, and the shadows twisted differently now. The Dragon Queen's tail twitched under the weight of chains. She had not moved like this in centuries. For a moment neither spoke. Time stretched, filled only with the soft echoes of metal and the faint hum of life. The tomb had been empty for too long. It had been cold, silent, and dead. But now it felt watched. Rylan touched one of the chains. The metal was cold, unyielding, but his hands were steady. He found a small lever and tried to lift it. Sparks flew, and a low grinding sound echoed across the chamber. The Dragon Queen flinched. It had been so long since she had heard such a sound, and her heart, long buried in shadow, beat a little faster. "You're awake," she whispered to herself, though no sound left her lips. She could not speak yet, but she could sense the human's intent. There was no malice. No hunger. Just hope. The tomb seemed to react. Panels along the walls flickered faintly. Old lights blinked to life, revealing the size of the chamber. It was enormous, high enough for a creature of her scale to stretch its wings. Rusted statues of dragons lined the walls, frozen in poses of flight and battle. They had watched her enter this prison, and now they seemed to watch the human. Rylan felt the air thicken. He could sense the presence before he saw it. The Dragon Queen's massive head lifted slightly, and her eyes opened fully. They glowed faintly in the dim light, a color lost to time. He froze, but he did not step back. Instead he looked straight at her. "Do you need help?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The Queen studied him. 2,000 years of silence, 2,000 years of waiting, and now a human, a small, fragile creature compared to her strength, offered aid without fear. The tomb trembled slightly as if it recognized the choice being made. Rylan worked quickly, not recklessly. Each lock he freed made the queen stir more. Her wings twitched, her tail swished, and the vibration in the air grew stronger. She had been alone for too long. She had forgotten the warmth of hope. Now that spark returned slowly, like the first light of a distant sun. Finally, one massive chain fell with a loud clatter. The sound echoed through the chamber, loud enough to shake loose dust from the ceiling. The Dragon Queen drew a deep breath, her chest rising after centuries of stillness. Her eyes fixed on the human. She did not move yet. She could not. But she was aware. She was alive. And for the first time in 2,000 years, the tomb felt less like a prison. Rylan smiled faintly. "You're not alone anymore," he said. The queen did not answer. She did not need to. The bond had begun. The tomb, once silent and cold, seemed to sigh as if in relief. Somewhere deep inside, life stirred. The first step of a long awakening had begun, and the galaxy, still far away, had no idea that its most ancient power was slowly returning to the stars. The rusted tomb had not breathed in millennia. But now it breathed again. The Dragon Queen's eyes followed every movement of the human. Rylan's hands were steady as he worked, adjusting the ancient locks and studying the rusted panels. Most humans would have turned and run when they saw something so massive and dangerous. But not Rylan. He stayed. He did not tremble. He did not panic. The queen's mind had long been filled with suspicion and caution. She had been betrayed before, tricked by those who feared her power. Every being who approached her tomb over 2,000 years had brought only greed or fear. They wanted her strength. They wanted to see her fall. Most had left quickly when they realized she could still kill them without moving. But Rylan was different. She could sense it. He moved carefully, yes, but without hesitation. He did not speak to her with commands. He did not promise glory or threaten pain. He only worked quietly, almost like he respected the long silence she had endured. "Almost there," he murmured, running his fingers along another chain. Sparks flew as metal ground against metal, and the vibration in the air grew stronger. The Dragon Queen's chest rose slightly with a weak breath. Her body was still fragile, but life coursed through her veins again. The human noticed the faint movement and paused. He did not want to push her too fast. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said softly, "but I am not leaving. I will help you." The queen's mind stirred at his words. She had forgotten how long it felt to hear a voice that did not demand or threaten. For centuries, silence had been her only companion. Now a human, small and fragile, offered her freedom without fear. She could not speak, could not yet move freely, but she watched. She listened. And slowly, the tension that had held her for 2,000 years loosened. Rylan worked on the chains, and the queen began to test her strength. She shifted slightly, stretching her wings a little. Dust and small pieces of rust fell from the ceiling, but she did not care. The tomb was old. It had waited long enough. Now something new had entered. The hum of the tomb grew louder, almost like it responded to her awakening. Rylan felt it in his chest. His heart beat faster, not from fear but from wonder. The queen's presence filled the space, and he understood for the first time the stories of dragons. They were not myths. They were living power, old and vast. Still he did not run. Even when her tail flicked across the floor, sending a small wave of dust and metal scraps in the air, he stayed. Even when her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, a color that time had not stolen, he stayed. He understood something simple: she was alive, not a threat. Yet. The queen tested another chain. Her claws, though weak, scratched the floor slightly. Sparks flew and the vibration grew stronger. The human did not move. He watched carefully, waiting, learning. He understood that rushing her could be dangerous. Patience was safer, but more than that, patience was respectful. "Your chains are old," he said softly, "but you are older. You survived this tomb for thousands of years. You are stronger than this metal. And I will help you get free." The queen's mind remembered the pain of betrayal. She remembered the enemies who had locked her away. She remembered the loneliness, the silence, the weight of waiting for centuries. But she also remembered something long buried: trust. She had trusted before and it had been broken. Could she trust a human? Could she let him touch the chains that had held her for millennia? She allowed a small test. A finger of her claw brushed lightly against one of the chains. It rattled under her touch. Rylan noticed immediately and adjusted his grip. "Easy," he said. "We'll do this together." The tomb seemed to breathe with them. Lights flickered, Dust moved in slow spirals and the hum became louder. The queen felt the vibration in her chest. Her heart, long frozen by despair, beat faster. She was not alone anymore. For the first time in 2,000 years, someone believed in her without fear. Minutes passed. Chains fell one by one, some heavy, some rusted nearly through. Rylan worked carefully, sometimes wiping sweat from his forehead. The queen did not intervene directly, but her presence made the work easier. The metal seemed to respond to life, to courage. The tomb, once cold and empty, felt almost alive now. Then came the heaviest chain. It had bound her wing to the floor, keeping her from rising. Rylan placed both hands on it. Sparks flew as he worked. The queen's wings twitched nervously. If she had the strength, she would have lifted him into the air. But she did not. Instead, she waited, watching. Finally, with a loud clatter, the chain fell. The sound echoed across the tomb. The queen stretched slightly, testing her body. Her wings rose slowly, then fell, weak but moving. Dust swirled in the air, and a faint glow of life shimmered along her scales. She was awakening. Rylan stepped back, smiling faintly. "You're not alone," he said again. "You don't have to be alone anymore." The queen's eyes studied him, and for the first time she recognized courage. Not the kind that came with weapons or power, but the courage to face something unknown and choose not to run. That courage was human, and it was rare. The tomb had been a prison for centuries. It had been cold, silent, and lifeless. But now it hummed with the slow pulse of life. The queen's body stirred. Her mind cleared slightly. And somewhere deep inside, the spark of hope began to grow. Rylan looked at her, then around the chamber. "We have a long way to go," he said softly. "But you're not trapped anymore." The queen did not reply. She did not need to. Her eyes glowed faintly, and she raised her head a little higher. The chains were gone. The tomb was no longer her cage. She was alive, and the human had chosen to stay when every instinct told him to run. That choice mattered more than any weapon, more than any fleet, more than any plan of revenge. For the first time in 2,000 years, the Dragon Queen felt she might move again. And the human, the one who refused to run, would walk beside her. The tomb, ancient and rusted, had begun to breathe once more. Not with fear. Not with despair. But with the slow, careful rhythm of life returning. The Dragon Queen moved slowly at first, her body still weak from centuries of stillness. Each step echoed across the rusted tomb, metal clanging softly under the weight of her claws. Rylan stayed close, watching carefully. He did not speak loudly, knowing that sound might startle her, but he made small encouraging gestures. "Take it easy," he said softly. "We don't need to rush." The queen's eyes scanned the walls. The chamber was enormous, filled with statues and machinery that told the story of her people. Long ago, dragons had ruled the stars. They had built fleets, guided civilizations, and kept the balance in the galaxy. Now, most of that had been forgotten. Statues of dragons, frozen in battle and flight, were all that remained. Rust and decay had claimed the rest. The queen touched a statue lightly with her claw. It vibrated faintly, as if remembering her touch. She remembered the galaxy she had once protected. Empires that had seemed powerful were weak now. Planets she had once flown over were silent. And the species that had betrayed her centuries ago had long vanished. Rylan noticed her pause and followed her gaze. "You protected them?" he asked. The queen did not answer with words. She only nodded slightly, her eyes reflecting memories long buried. She had defended countless worlds, guided species, and kept peace among civilizations that had eventually feared her. Fear had been her undoing, not her actions. The galaxy had forgotten what dragons were truly like. It had remembered only power and danger. Rylan knelt and examined the control panels near the statues. Sparks flew as he brushed dust away. "You've been here a long time," he said quietly. "No one remembered. They thought you were gone forever." The queen watched him. She could not speak yet, but she understood. The tomb had been a prison, yes, but it had also been a memory trap. For 2,000 years, the galaxy had lived without dragons, and the balance had shifted. Now she was awake again. And the question was simple. What would she do with her return? Rylan began opening old access panels. He studied the maps inside, noticing the signals of planets that were still alive and those that had gone dark. "The galaxy thinks you're dead," he said softly. But they were wrong. The queen flexed her wings slightly. The movement was slow, careful, but it was progress. She could feel the energy returning to her body. Her scales gleamed faintly under the flickering lights. The hum in the tomb grew louder. Life, she realized, had not left her entirely. As she regained strength, her mind drifted back to the betrayal that had imprisoned her. Ancient allies, humans and aliens alike, had feared her influence. They had built the tomb, sealed her in chains and left her to die. And for centuries they had celebrated her absence, believing the galaxy was safer without her. But in truth it had been weaker. Civilizations had fallen apart without dragons to guide them. Wars had erupted. Worlds had been lost. Rylan noticed her stare and understood that she was thinking. "I don't know your history," he said softly. "But maybe it's not too late to fix it." The queen lifted her head higher, her eyes glowing brighter. She could remember the humans she had protected long ago. They had been small, fragile and curious just like this one. Unlike most creatures, they did not always fear her. Some had trusted her. And one of them was standing here now. Slowly she spread her wings. They were weak, tattered in places, but the motion itself was enough to shake loose centuries of dust. The tomb hummed with energy. Sparks flew from broken machinery as if the chamber itself acknowledged her awakening. The queen flexed her claws and lifted one foot. For the first time in millennia she moved freely. Rylan smiled faintly. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "And you're not alone." The queen's mind raced. If she returned to the galaxy as a force of power, she could destroy anything that opposed her. But that was not what she wanted. She remembered the world she had once saved, the species she had once guided, and the humans who had once trusted her. Power without purpose was meaningless. She looked at Rylan, standing quietly beside her. The human had not promised her glory. He had not tried to control her. He had simply refused to run. That simple choice, so small to others, carried more weight than any fleet or weapon. It reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. Strength was not only in the claws or fire. Strength was in courage, in trust, in the will to do what was right. Rylan reached toward her. "We need to get out of here," he said softly. "The tomb is old. If it collapses we could be trapped again." The queen nodded, understanding the urgency. She stepped carefully toward the exit. Her wings lifted slightly, brushing against the ceiling, then folded neatly to keep balance. The hum of the tomb grew louder. Dust and metal fragments fell as the ancient chamber recognized life returning to it. They moved slowly, carefully through the halls. Statues seemed to watch them, frozen dragons observing the new path of the living queen. She remembered them all, the ones who had flown before her, the ones who had protected the galaxy. And she understood something important. The galaxy had not only forgotten her, it had forgotten what dragons stood for. With each step she felt her strength returning. The chains were gone. The fear had faded. She could choose the next moment of the galaxy and she could choose wisely. Rylan glanced at her and said softly, "They won't know what hit them." The queen's eyes glowed brighter. She did not think of destruction. She thought of guidance, of balance, of teaching a galaxy that had lost its way. Her power was vast, yes, but it was not meant for fear. It was meant for protection. Outside the tomb, the stars were distant and cold. Signals of nearby planets flickered faintly in the distance. Rylan activated his ship's sensors and scanned the area. "We're not alone out here," he said. "But no one can stop you now. You're awake." The queen stretched her wings fully. Though weak, the motion carried authority. She could feel life in her muscles, the pulse of energy that had not left her for 2,000 years. The galaxy, she realized, had forgotten dragons. But she remembered it all. And she would teach it again. The tomb, once dead and silent, now vibrated with the slow rhythm of awakening. The Dragon Queen moved carefully, guided by the human who refused to run. Together they would step into a galaxy that had forgotten her, and she would remind it what dragons were truly meant to be, guardians, not monsters. The stars waited silently. And for the first time in centuries, the Dragon Queen and a human were ready to return. The Dragon Queen rose fully now, her wings stretching wide though weak spots marked her centuries of imprisonment. The tomb behind her groaned and shook slightly as if it were relieved to release her at last. Dust swirled in the air and sparks flew from broken consoles. The human, Rylan, watched carefully but did not hesitate to step beside her. He understood that her next choice could shape not only their fate but the fate of the galaxy itself. Rylan gestured toward the stars. "You have strength. You could take revenge on those who betrayed you. You could reclaim the galaxy with fire." The queen's eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the distant stars. Her mind drifted back to the past, the betrayal that had locked her away for 2,000 years. She remembered the allies who had turned against her, the fleets that had hunted her, the civilizations that had feared her might. She could feel the anger, the longing for revenge, bubbling in her chest. But as she looked at Rylan, she felt something else, a quiet strength she had almost forgotten. This human, small and fragile compared to her vast power, had entered her tomb without fear. He had not promised her glory or power. He had only offered help and stayed when others would have run. That choice, so simple, carried more weight than any weapon or fleet she could summon. The tomb's hum seemed to pulse with her thoughts. Sparks from broken machinery flickered like distant stars. She flexed her wings, testing her strength. Her claws dug into the floor, leaving shallow marks, and her tail swished cautiously. She was awake, alive, and powerful. Yet she understood that her power alone could not shape the galaxy the way she wished. Rylan stepped closer. "If you fight them you will win," he said softly. "But what then? Do you want to be feared or remembered?" The Queen's mind paused. Memories of destruction flashed before her eyes. Burning planets, fleeing civilizations, screams of fear. She remembered how it had felt to command respect through terror. And then she remembered the moments of protection. The world she had shielded, the species she had guided, the lives she had saved. Power without purpose was empty. Fear was easy. Respect was earned. She lowered her wings slightly and lifted her head higher. Her choice was forming, like a star emerging from darkness. She could destroy those who had wronged her. She could make the galaxy tremble. But that was not the life she wanted. That was not the legacy she had dreamed of. She remembered the quiet courage of the human beside her, the one who refused to run. That courage showed her a path she had almost forgotten, strength with restraint. The chamber seemed to respond. Dust swirled and flickering lights pulsed softly. Statues of dragons frozen in battle seemed to watch her. They had seen empires rise and fall, wars won and lost, and they had waited for her to return. And now they waited for her choice. Rylan extended a hand toward her. "I will walk with you," he said. "We don't need to fight blindly. We can show the galaxy a new way." The Queen's eyes softened. She stepped closer to him, her massive claws careful not to harm him. She could feel the power returning to her body, but more important, she felt clarity returning to her mind. The galaxy had expected her to rage, to burn, to seek vengeance. Instead, she would show restraint. She would show that dragons could protect rather than destroy, guide rather than conquer. Outside the tomb, the stars gleamed cold and distant. Signals of distant civilizations flickered faintly in the dark. The human beside her checked his instruments. "They'll know you're awake soon," he said. "They'll come. Some will want war. Some will want peace. But they won't know what to expect from you now." The Queen flexed her wings again, this time fully. Though still fragile in parts, her body was regaining power. She could feel the pull of the galaxy, the threads of old conflicts, the whispers of civilizations long gone. And she could also feel something else, choice. She could take the path of rage or the path of wisdom. And she understood that wisdom was the stronger path. She turned her gaze toward Rylan. He was small, yes, but brave. He had entered her tomb, freed her from chains, and refused to run. That courage had reminded her that true strength was not in fear or destruction, but in compassion and courage. Rylan smiled faintly. "Whatever you choose I'll follow," he said. The Queen inhaled slowly, filling her lungs with the stale air of the tomb one last time. Then she exhaled and let her wings rise fully. Sparks and dust swirled as the chamber seemed to acknowledge her decision. She would not destroy. She would not rule through fear. She would guide, protect, and remind the galaxy of what dragons were truly meant to be. From the shadows of the tomb, old machines stirred faintly, detecting life and movement after centuries of silence. The Dragon Queen's choice had awakened more than just her body. It had awakened the tomb itself. And as she stepped toward the exit, each footfall was measured, deliberate, filled with purpose. Rylan followed closely, keeping pace but not leading. He understood that the Queen was the one making the choice. He was only a companion, a witness, and a guide if needed. Together they walked toward the light of the tomb entrance. The stars outside glittered like a million eyes watching, waiting to see what she would do. The Queen's mind reflected on the centuries of silence, the betrayal, and the loneliness she had endured. 2,000 years had changed her, but they had not broken her. She was still a dragon queen, still vast in power, still capable of commanding awe. But now she was also wise. She had chosen restraint. She had chosen guidance. She had chosen the path of life, not death. As the tomb doors creaked open, the cold light of distant stars spilled inside. The Dragon Queen paused at the threshold. She looked down at Rylan, then out at the vast emptiness of space. This was not the galaxy she had left. Much had changed. Empires had risen and fallen. Worlds had been lost. And yet, some things remained, hope, courage, and the spark of life that refused to die. She stepped fully into the open, her wings lifting gently. Dust and metal swirled in her wake. The tomb, once a prison, was now empty and silent again. But she was free and her choice had been made. Ryland smiled. The galaxy won't know what hit them, he said again, but this time it was not fear. It was excitement. The Queen's eyes glowed brighter. She did not think of war or vengeance. She thought of protection, guidance, and teaching the galaxy a lesson it had forgotten. Dragons were guardians, not monsters. And so, with the human who refused to run by her side, the Dragon Queen stepped into the galaxy once more. She was broken by time, yes, but stronger in spirit. The choice had been made. And the stars would watch as she shaped a new future. The Dragon Queen flew slowly above the planet's surface, her wings stirring the thin clouds below. Ryland followed in his small shuttle, keeping pace as best he could. Below, cities sparkled faintly in the evening light, unaware that a force from the past had returned. The galaxy had forgotten dragons and humans had long believed they were myths. But now, one dragon had awakened, and beside her was a human who had dared to stay when others would have run. The Queen's eyes scanned the horizon. She had power enough to strike fear across the worlds below. She could sweep through the skies and demand obedience. She could reclaim what had been lost. Yet, as she looked at Ryland, she remembered her choice. She would not destroy. She would guide. She would protect. Strength was not about domination. It was about courage, patience, and compassion. Ryland spoke softly through the ship's communicator. You could show them what dragons are, he said. Not just their power but what they can mean to the galaxy. The Queen flexed her wings and rose higher. Memories of centuries spent in silence flowed through her mind. She remembered betrayal, loneliness, fear, and loss. But she also remembered hope. Hope had returned with this human, small and fragile, yet brave enough to enter her tomb and refuse to run. That hope was the seed of something greater than power. It was the seed of respect. The first planet they approached was a small colony that had once been under her protection long ago. Its people had lived in fear of galactic conflicts. When they saw the massive dragon approach, panic spread. Cities went dark, alarms rang, and citizens hid. But the Queen did not roar or strike. She circled the skies, letting her presence be felt but not feared. Ryland guided the humans below. Do not panic, he said over comms. She is awake, yes, but she is not here to harm you. The Queen hovered above the main city, wings partially folded to show control. The colony's leaders came out slowly, trembling, unsure what to expect. She lowered her massive head, almost bowing, and a soft hum of recognition vibrated through the air. The humans could feel it in their chests, a pulse of calm that made their fears shrink. For the first time in the galaxy, humans understood something they had never truly believed. Dragons could be allies, not enemies. Power did not always come with destruction. Strength could protect rather than destroy. And courage could come in the smallest forms, even in humans who dared to walk where no one else would. News spread quickly across the stars. Signals bounced from planet to planet, reporting that the Dragon Queen had returned. Some fleets prepared for war, expecting vengeance and fire. Others watched carefully, uncertain what this ancient being would do. And all across the galaxy, humans told the story of a small explorer who had entered a tomb and refused to flee. A human who had freed the Queen without weapons, without greed, without fear. The Dragon Queen moved with care. She never attacked. She never destroyed. She protected colonies from pirate raids, guided lost ships through dangerous sectors, and helped repair broken planets using knowledge from her own long history. Wherever she went, she reminded the galaxy of balance. And everywhere she went, humans were there beside her, guiding, helping, learning, and growing in courage. Ryland stayed close, often riding on her back when traveling between planets. Others watched, amazed that a human could walk beside a dragon as an equal. He did not ride her because he demanded to. He rode because she allowed it, and that trust became a lesson for all who saw it. Courage was not about strength alone, it was about standing by what is right even when danger is near. Over time, humans became known across the stars not for weapons, not for empires, but for something rarer: courage, compassion, and the will to do what is right. They were the species who would enter darkness and choose to help, the species who would face power and remain unafraid. And dragons, who had once ruled through fear, began to follow them willingly, curious and cautious, learning that humans could be guides as well as allies. The Dragon Queen often looked at Ryland and felt something she had not felt in millennia: peace. She had been alone for 2,000 years, trapped in silence and shadow. Now she was free not only in body but in spirit. And the human who refused to run had reminded her what life could mean when courage walked beside power. In the skies above the galaxy, stars glittered like distant fires. Ships moved between planets, unaware of the subtle balance that now existed. But dragons flew in quiet patrols, guided by humans, protecting worlds rather than conquering them. And everywhere that humans were, the story of courage spread. Of a human who freed a dragon who chose protection over vengeance, and a partnership that reminded the galaxy of the true meaning of strength. Rylan laughed softly as he watched the queen fly past a planet. "You didn't have to be alone anymore," he said. "And now, no one has to be afraid of you." The queen's eyes glimmered, reflecting the stars. She did not speak, but she understood. The galaxy would remember this moment, the day a human reminded a dragon of what it meant to protect rather than destroy. Humans had shown courage, dragons had shown restraint, and the universe had learned a lesson that no fleet, no weapon, no empire could teach. And so, humanity became known not as the strongest species, nor the largest, nor the most advanced. Humanity became known for courage. The courage to enter darkness, to stand by what is right, to help without fear, and to inspire others to do the same. The dragon queen soared higher, carrying the hope of dragons and humans together. Rylan followed, smiling quietly. The galaxy, vast and endless, had learned something it had forgotten. Power without courage is empty, but courage can awaken even the oldest and greatest of beings. And in that quiet, shining moment above countless worlds, the dragon queen and the human who freed her became a legend. One that spoke not of fear but of hope, trust, and the bravery of a species that refused to run. The stars, silent and bright, seemed to shine just a little warmer that day, as if the universe itself had learned what humanity could truly become.